Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello, everyone. My special guest tonight is noted poet and author Alexander Poster. I love that name. This is his second QLPOR podcast appearance. Alexander recently published a full-length poetry collection, A Refuge for Those Who Like Sad Endings. I want to say that again. It's such a beautiful, beautiful title. One more time. Just one more time. A refuge for those who like sad endings. What that? Oh wow, that's so powerful. Welcome back, Alexander.
Oh well, it's good to be here.
I'm glad you're back with me, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you very much. It was kind of unreal seeing it out, but I'm glad that it's out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. Well, let's begin this poetic journey. All right. Would you mind sharing with us what was the inspiration behind writing this book? What were the things that inspired you, Alexander?
Well, I guess there are two different kinds of inspiration. You know, there's the personal kind of inspiration. I'm friends with another one of your frequent guests, Martin Graff, who does spoken word and piano. And we meet every week. We watch movies, and, he had and has these creative pursuits, and I felt that I wanted to have one and dialogue together. So the impetus to get back into poetry and starting writing serious poetry. As opposed to dirty poems to your friends, came from there. In terms of sort of the themes of the book, because if you look at the cover of the book and if you read some of the poems, this isn't the happiest book of poetry, once encountered. I had some ideas, and then I looked up these ideas, and I found that other people already had those ideas and expressed them better than I did. So I'll talk about those for a bit. There's a fellow, and his name was Ernest Becker. And he wrote The Denial of Death. That was the name of the book. By the way, he died when he was very young, so there was no denial of death for him. But he was a philosopher, and he sort of said that everybody kind of has their mind on mortality. And indeed, I turned 40 years old when I started writing this. I was thinking about that an awful lot, and that it's one of the central motives, in the human experience, that it inspires people to do what they do, whether it's to write a book of poetry or to take up boxing or to do whatever, what some of these weird characters in. That's
it is all tying together, because as I shared earlier, that title is just so striking to me. I mean, it almost gives me goosebumps or chills. Just those, how many words? 1, 2, let. You know what I'm saying? It just really does because it just stands out. So, tell me about the title. What was the inspiration for that?
Well, it came from an encounter I had, and I've been married for 13 years, but it came from an encounter I had with an ex-girlfriend a long time ago. And we were watching this movie called Little Miss Sunshine. I don't know if you can see it or remember.
I remember it. I remember it. Alan Arkin. I remember it, yes.
Yep. Oh yeah. Absolutely fantastic. And it's about this odd family that's trying to rush their daughter to a beauty pageant. And when they arrive, they find that they're sort of underprepared compared to the other contestants.
I remember. Abigail Breslin, yes. That's a great movie. Great movie.
Exactly. And they don't win the beauty pageant. But they do in some way. It's a poignant ending because the family ends up closer together. And the person I was dating at the time said, why couldn't they have just given the movie a happy ending? I really like this family. They should have had a happy ending. They should have won the beauty contest. And I said, well, that would ruin the message of the whole movie,
Yes.
It's important that they actually lose so you can take away the message. Now, since then, I've spoken to people about the movie, and they've said, well, I kind of wish that they won. So, there's demand for happy endings out there, and I guess you can watch a TV commercial if you want a happy ending. I don't want to sound dismissive. This is a refuge for those who like sad endings, who like the movie Little Miss Sunshine just the way it is.
Wow. So the book itself is a refuge.
Yes. The book is a refuge. It's
very nice. Very nice. Well, you shared also about the themes. Tell me more about the themes. Break them down for me, please.
Okay. Well, there's the concept of mortality and it motivating people. Orson Welles, he wasn't a poet. He never wrote any poetry, and I kind of wish he did because he was a very articulate man. And he said something, and I think it's a universal thing for people. And he said, I'm not a happy man, but there are moments of joy in my life. And, I mean, if you look at the type of poem that I try to write, it's not a happy poem. There are moments of humor in it. But on the whole, if you're balancing, it's some of the heavier stuff, and is obviously going to weigh more. The ton of bricks is going to weigh more than the ton of feathers, so to speak. So that's just another philosophical sort of foundation that when I was writing this, I tried to keep in mind.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It took 2 years because it didn't start as a book. I originally just wanted to get a chapbook published, and then people were, having contests for manuscripts, and I try to keep writing poetry, otherwise I think that I'll kind of backslide in how well I write it. So there were just more and more poems, and by the time I got someone to say yes to the manuscript. It was more than 100 pages, and
wow.
2 years. So it's kind of the result of a continued effort, and not succeeding at first, but hopefully getting better. So.
I remember your first time with me. I'm not sure it was 2019, 2020, probably before the pandemic. Yep. I really enjoyed your work, and it was from your chapbook, I believe. So I'm looking forward to hearing your work again tonight. One last question before we move into why we're really here, to hear your work. As you think about being a poet, as you think about your own lived experiences all these years, especially in terms of writing, what is the most valuable piece of advice you've been given about writing?
I've wondered about that myself, and I think it goes back to college, and this wasn't a writing professor. I'm a historian. His name was Ray Van Dam. He taught Roman history. I know there's a meme going around right now where people ask men how often they think about the Roman Empire. In college, I did it a lot because I took a Roman history class. And he was a guy who was close to retirement, and he just didn't want to read any more 5-paragraph essays from students. So he said, take what you learned, and write a short story with it. Basically, what he said was that you should imbue your story with a sort of creative nuttiness. That your story shouldn't be normal. And I really kind of latched on to that idea. And recently I was reading by the late comedian Norm Macdonald, who I admire greatly. I think in many ways his humor was poetic. But he said that, looking at modern art and stuff, that, to look at the painting and to see the strokes of paint and the composition, and not to see what's painted, but to see actually the paint and what's underneath the illusion. That's kind of the germ of imagination.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if Norm Macdonald was kidding, because he usually is, but nonetheless, I thought, wow. And I thought about, don't write anything normal. Let creative nuttiness sort of imbue your story. And I thought that these were two very similar ideas in a way, and that it was the same advice reflected kind of 20 years later.
Wow.
To kind of
so it really does
things.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please continue. I'm just excited listening. Tell me more.
That you kind of see things differently, but also see things as they are, just because of the amount of illusion in life. So it's just two parallel anecdotes that kind of reinforced an idea.
Well, as I said earlier, everything ties together in a sense. I've been watching documentaries on the Byzantine Empire. And
oh, wow.
I love the Byzantine Empire, to be quite honest.
Oh. Yeah.
And maybe we can talk about the Roman Empire, too, and then talk about the Byzantine after the show. I'm multifaceted. But what I was saying is you used the word illusion, there are people who feel as if the 1,000 years of the Byzantine Empire was an illusion, and they don't talk about it very much. It doesn't have the same resonance as the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire. So, I mean, hey, we can talk about that later. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even though the Eastern Roman Empire was around for longer, there were a group of scholars about 50 years ago who just said, what if this era of history didn't happen? And it was kind of a jolt. Indeed, Western sources are really bad during that time. Sources are better, which is good because, the Byzantine Empire in many ways was the Roman Empire. In many ways was better than the Roman Empire.
Yes. Okay, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
The focus tonight.
Okay.
Here's your new book of poetry. Everyone.
Okay.
Are we now ready to hear Alexander Poster sharing his work? You're on, Alexander. Take it away.
Okay. So I thought I'd choose my first few poems as some that illustrate this philosophy. The first one is the first poem in the book, actually. It's called What We Found When We Emptied the Sea. What we found when we emptied the sea. Life is an unshaven leg. Cling to it like a leech until the ash from a red cigarette scalds our flesh and we fall alone, sinking fathoms until the water swallows the sun and we rest in a sea of tranquility we cannot experience. When the water boils away and turns to steam, any remaining witnesses will wonder if all the world is parasites in Parliament. The second poem is called Thanksgiving Morning Thoughts About Death. And I included this one because it was the first poem I read on your show, and it still applies. It's the only one I'm going to reread, so I'm going to do that. Thanksgiving Morning Thoughts About Death. And wonder when I will die. I think it has to do with objects and my kinship with them. One time my wife lost her blanket. She was swaddled in it as an infant. When we left the hotel room, I told her we had it with us. I thought we did, but I was in a hurry. I can't think about that blanket stranded in the wilderness and my wife's incandescent round tears without it being a watershed moment of remorse. I think about the time I yelled at her when she wore an efflorescent blouse, pink, with roses and butterflies. She never wore it again. No balm in Gilead, no sinner's cure, including her reassurance that a baby puked on it, has made me remember it without contrition. There are so many places I will not go, and people I will not see. Charles Bronson once said, responsibility is a big rock that weighs a ton, and it bends you until it finally buries you. I have no idea if he is right. He yelled that at some children on a Hollywood set. But I don't think he wanted to go back to that set after all his caterwaul. I'm not crazy. I know that every crazy person says that, but maybe you die when there is nothing left to swaddle you and no place for asylum, whether you're Harters or not. Charles Bronson died at 81, years after he had stopped visiting familiar places, his hip replaced with a rock of scrap metal. So, the third poem is called Wisdom from the Mist, and it involves a conversation I had with a boss I had, and a man I admire. Wisdom from the Mist. Old Ed Bryn once told me it's not worth battling a tidal wave. It just isn't worth your time. And he was wise, the sort of man who never gets wet. I just wish the tsunamis were fewer. because it's the small storms that drown you. So Ed hardly sleeps. He says he has the stamina of a shark, but really, he's just checking that his every breath is dry. So, this fourth one, and I think it sort of mirrors the first one, which is why I'm including it, is called Translucent Times. Translucent Times. I wish instead of growing old, we would slowly disappear. Rather than talking about Grandpa's DEATH, the opaque children who squinted to see the old man would be unburdened and face the day with eyes open. But it's best not to stare at the sun, even if you wear shades. Days are long and life is short, and radiance burns the retina of the enlightened. My silhouette has changed. I cast a wider shadow as the years pass, and people who laugh about the sunbeams that I block should pull the beam out of their own eye and embrace the bright blindness of clarity, since death is all around us, eclipsing the transparent. The last one I'm going to read for this section is the first one from this project. It's the one that Marty and I were talking about 2 years ago. It's called A Million Chimneys. So here's A Million Chimneys. It's been a long time since I've seen a good tall tree cut up. Logs stacked, covered with bleeding autumn leaves. Then a flame, rubies flickering in the hearth. Thick gray threads spooling from the chimney, limbs pulsing, the threads animated and alive, like us. A fever forges no gems. Limbs knitted together like 1Y012, 4R15. Stacked and idle while ventilator hymns play as an orange man dances by the flue. The fools of their quarry providing no warmth, no shelter for us. Hand me an axe, not a shovel. And those are 5 poems that sort of illustrate the philosophy of that collection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go back to those predominant themes.
Mm-hmm.
We have death, sadness, maybe.
Yes.
A melancholy. Is it a melancholy outlook on life, you think?
I'd say, at least in terms of what other people sort of mask to the public, I'd say so, yeah.
All right, then. Because I'm tying it all into the title, a refuge where you can talk about death and not feel ashamed about talking about death. Yeah. And I love the line in terms when you spell death, you spelled it out, death. I like that. That's nice. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
So if you can name, I guess I'm just really trying to tease out these themes again because I'm hanging on every word, but I want to make sure, I want to make sure I get it right, but my getting it right would only be getting it right for me. It may not be the same right for you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, how did you go about selecting the poems? How did you organize the book? So you've got death.
So
what else?
Yeah.
A lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I had more poems than went in here, and in terms of what to include, one, appropriateness, since there's an overall theme of the collection, and Second of all, crowdsourcing. That there are a lot of poetry forums, and I would like to thank you because you introduced me to R.M. Engelhardt, who has a poetry forum in Albany, New York. He has kind of the same outlook as me, and through R.M. Engelhardt, I met the guy who published this collection.
Wow, very nice.
Yeah. Mike Zone, and someone of kind of the same mindset, and I would post them on my personal feed and post them in the forums, and see what stuck with people. See, because I can put something together in my own mind, but it can be kind of opaque to others. So getting feedback from people was very important. And in terms of how I arrange this collection, it's not all about death. There's some activism in here.
Okay.
Some of it's political. Although when you're talking about sort of the denial of death and doing things because you fear your own mortality, and you talk about, say, former presidents, there's a nice dovetail there. And there's a little bit on size acceptance too that I tried to get in because I'm a large man, and it's something that crosses my mind a lot, and I felt that I could fit that in better than I fit in to others, to some places, I guess. So,
wow, that's a very powerful statement. Very powerful, and I appreciate you sharing the way you're feeling sometimes, the way you feel sometimes, because I feel that way too, in a different way. Not fitting in. So I understand. That's why I'm resonating with every word that you're sharing, as I did the first time you were here. So I love your work. I really do.
Oh, thank you very much.
I really do, and I'm very proud of you too, because you wanted to publish a book, and you did. A full-length book, and you did. That's beautiful. It really is.
Well, thank you. And again, a refuge for those who like sad endings. If you're someone who doesn't fit in, you're probably not about all of those happy endings, because that's probably not your story. So it's
that's not my story. Alexander, please share some more poetry, my friend.
Okay, we're going to do a few on size acceptance and some other stuff too. This one's called Mahala Mullins, and Mahala Mullins is an ancestor of my wife. She's also an Appalachian person of some fame who lived in the late 19th and early 20th century. So, Mahala Mullins. Everyone thinks Big Haley ate the apple, but she hid it where only the moon could see, and its midnight radiance made the bottom of her shine. The men gathered at the still, undeceived and thirsty. The Lord rose in the holler and banished Haley, but she had grown, wise and bellowed, "Take me yonder if you can." Can God make a stone so big he cannot lift it? The earth is a rock, and the whole world is in his hands. But a hard-scrabble hill woman at 500 pounds defied the might of the Almighty. Catchable, but not fetchable, unlike the moon-shining men incarcerated by dogma. Big Haley rests in Eden still, teen children and the serpent she preserved in the firewater of paradise. The audacity of us to wish her well. The second poem is from Sea to Shining Sea, and this is about my wife, who me and her look similar in a way. So, from Sea to Shining Sea. Give me a wife who is vast, as wide as an irregular number, who I can count forever and never find the end. Give me a wife who is vast, who can envelop me in softness as fluffy as a cloud in the sky that I can parachute into. Give me a wife who is vast, like the hills of Kentucky that cradle so many in the shade of their hollers. Give me a wife who is vast, whose mind can finish the crossword in 10 minutes but enjoy the prose of a menu for an eternity. Give me a wife who is vast as I am, and we will carve through any stone in our way in the warmest ice age that's ever been. Oh. And poems 3 and 4 are an example of, why I might put two poems together, and why together might be better than either one of them separately. This poem is called "It Is Very Easy to Love Alone." A rose is a rose is a rose. Hemingway sold his baby shoes and, with eyes bright, bold, and clear, recited Stein. And Hemingway talked hardly about little things. Then they had a fight. No language passed between them. She did not need the shelter of his beard. Hemingway said, "A bitch is a bitch is a bitch." And Hemingway talked hardly about little things. But his maxim still cradled her idea. Did he know? Was there a there? Old men, grow careful. And Hemingway talked hardly about little things. A gun is a gun is a gun. And then the fourth poem in this group, it's called "Everybody Hates Kathy Wood Right Now." Kathy Wood is an investment banker. So everyone hates Kathy Wood right now. Poems about investment are stupid. But a poem is a poem is a poem. If you see a bear in the woods, there is a maxim. If it's brown, lie down. Bruin was red. And the adage is bewildering when the bear is not in the woods. The broker stared at the bloody ursine streak sliding downward, as steep as the hills in Central Park, and said, "Everybody hates Kathy Wood right now." Those were his words. Investors growl such phrases in unison. He wasn't wrong. That Nimrod opened her maw like a honeypot and sicked the bears on all of us. Is a poem worth $3,000? We all know the answer to that. But it should be, since words can be as sharp as the horns of a bull. And the last one in this selection, this is something I never thought about publishing, but I have a friend named Alexander Perez who said he really liked this poem. And in terms of what I decide to include, if a poem has a sponsor, a champion who says that they really like it, I will include it. It's called Jungian Self-Analysis During the Holidays. Persona. The past haunts us, but I am unmovable as a broad evergreen, or better yet, a photograph of a broad evergreen. My instincts are my roots, and no wind can move me. I am safe from any tiller, shovel, or blight, and my trunk is too solid to bend with the breeze. I have all that I need right here. Shadow. A fireman throws candy at a 4th of July parade. The kids run and grab every piece except for the crybaby at the back, a pushover, literally a pushover, slim but always ravenous, filled only with dry rot during these festivals. What I resent the most is having to retell this story every time my weaknesses must be explained. This section was written by memory. Self-pity has devoured me. Anima animus. 10 minutes at attention without moving. The clock resets if I flinch or blink or shirk, and the drill instructors lie like a fog when they wish to make an example. Back to zero. The breeze makes me want to flinch. I flinch. F you, I've got all day, boys. Even in my youth, my back would howl. But when you walk on good wood, it doesn't creak when it wishes to make an example. I once bled for 3 years without stopping, an empty sanguine space in my body plugged with a rat. My wife lifts the heavy things because my back can no longer set examples. So I lie like a fog. The South. A Baroque Christmas tree felled easily by a chainsaw, haunted by phantom roots. And those are the themed and grouped second batch of poems I have for you.
Again, I'm sitting here just listening, taking it all in, and wondering, there's so many forms of writing. Why did you choose poetry to express your emotions in terms of your life experiences, your lived experiences?
First is that I have a background with poetry. Okay. You know, for years, I didn't study it formally, but I liked writing little bawdy rhymes to my friends, and that they always enjoyed them. But when I think about, my background, my dad, who was a college professor, and my mom, who was a visual artist, she did printmaking. One of the things that was most gratifying was my mom, who was 75 years old, and my dad, who's 84, being able to take this, which is sort of their genesis, the talents that they had, and I was lucky to inherit, and give them copies of this book, because it's what they're good at, and it enabled me to do an art project, but an art project that still has this focus on language, which I've worked in professionally lifelong. So that's
very nice.
That's an inspiration.
All right. So as you think about being a writer, being a poet, what are some of the important elements, then, of good writing?
I think the best element of writing, other than imbuing your writing with a sense of creative nuttiness, but I think even before that, is clarity. There are so many good poems that I have read online, and they're good poems, but they're hard to read. Simply because someone hasn't enjambed correctly, or they haven't broken things up into stanzas, or basically, and I hate sports metaphors, but they're holding the bat too hard. They're swinging it too hard. That, one of the things I did when I started writing poetry is I did stuff that was too opaque, with too many metaphors and too many image systems. So I tried to reduce the number of image systems, and I tried to make the poetry accessible, not, accessible in, a way that this poetry is for everyone. It's not. It's a refuge for those who like sad endings. But if you are a person searching for that refuge, I want you to be able to understand the poems.
Yes. I was just thinking about accessibility, synchronicity tonight, because I was thinking, I said, as I'm listening, that your poems are not so obtuse that you cannot understand them, that you can understand them, and that's the beauty of your work. That's the beauty of your work. I like that they're accessible, and you can wrap your fingers around the poems and pull and draw from them. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So As you think about the poetic devices that you used, what were some of your favorites?
One of my favorites is the simile, and this is someone. Well, I've read a lot of Sherman Alexie, who's the American Indian poet of some fame, and he uses similes. And I feel that sometimes when you try to jam things into metaphor, it happens a little too quickly for a reader, especially if you're reading the poetry aloud. And that when you explain that something is like something else or something is as something else, it gives the poem a conversational quality. And it's a device that I like to employ. Sometimes I see some very good poetry that's written using all metaphors, and I think that's a good way to do it too. But I think this is what's worked for me. Another thing I like to do is limit the image systems that, you know, as a poet, you can have like kind of a fire hose of imagery that you could just spray at your reader. You know, your reader's not going to enjoy getting sprayed with a fire hose. If you give them, one or two paths that they can walk down, and they can see you sort of thinking through the poem as they read it, I find they respond a lot better to that.
Okay. You know, this is your first full-length collection.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you trust, or who did you trust for an objective, constructive criticism of your work? Was there anyone, or you just did it on your own?
Well, I'd say there were three groups. The first group, as I mentioned, was kind of crowdsourcing the poem, and nobody reacts to it. No one. I start thinking about, why aren't people feeling anything in this poem? The second is Marty Graff, since he's done spoken word, and, I've read poetry for him, and he can be blunt, that I can read something I think might be the best thing I've ever written, and his response will be, well, I don't get it. And, that's a sign that, maybe I should rethink what I'm trying to say. And the third, of course, is my wife, who probably gets the first look at the poems that come out. And she'll either say that she likes the poem, or maybe you could do this differently. And every once in a while, she is like, that should not go on social media, burn it. So,
I like your wife.
She's honest with me. So, those three people or groups of people are kind of my editors, when I'm working on a poem. And they tell me the truth.
All right, very nice. Crowdsourcing. I've never heard that term used that way in terms of poetry online. Crowdsourcing. Tell me just a little about that.
It's posting in different forums. It's not your whole audience for a book, but it's a fraction of it. And, you give them a taste of a poem, or you give them a poem, and you see how they respond. If there are comments like, wow, that's a really good poem, then, you've written a really good poem. And if there's people who say they hate the poem, that's also pretty good, to be honest. The thing you want to avoid is indifference.
All right. All right, I'm going to look that term up tonight. I like it. I love guests who bring things to me because I want to learn and grow. So I'm glad you're with me. We're going to take just a short little break, and we'll be right back, Alexander. All right?
Okay.
are back. I am Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with the amazing Alexander Poster. Alexander, please share more of your work.
Sure thing. I've got some poems that they kind of illustrate stylistically what I try to do. I try to select these poems for that reason. The first poem is called Double or Nothing. Double or Nothing. My father and I are both ambidextrous. He can throw with two hands, me with none. Playing catch was as awkward as calling a fat woman pregnant. In the Depression, the kind you can't pay $200 a week to get rid of, Grandma's soda pouch and Mother Kangaroo cinched his left hand inside it until his fingers cut themselves open on the thicket of soft velvet. When she took the gloves off, he was reborn as mediocre as a child. Yes, his scribble had the right slant for a world ossified in cursive. But every 27 days, he'd pull the covers over his head. And inside that cavity, he dacked out sinistral designs with his crayon that slashed lines red as a newborn into the chaste white paper. He became, too, a man with skin made of tweed, on a motorcycle, giving knowing nods to Rennie Davis. In the 80s, the kind you can't get rid of with an air conditioner, I could not follow the water to the light. A mother's love never loosens its cinch. Her cord guided me out gently till I was as blue as the ink from a fountain pen. A hood of velvet over my face. 3 minutes, as silent as my father's generation, until what was left wheezed its awakening. But all that remains ain't right. I'm forever fettered by cursive, with no slant to speak of except during speech therapy. My skin is the typed word. Without it, I am naked. My father is too bad, but I am two in form only, an egg with no whiter yolk. I wonder who I would have been, but if you told me, I wouldn't understand. Still, I played catch with my father, but I know he yearned to play catch with me. This one's called A Green New Deal. Well, let's go. A Green New Deal. Kids these days grew up with broadband. They fidget and spin, babbling away with unpoetic vulnerability about death doula scholarships as they study for their ADHD tests like kites with broken strings. I have no word for the color blue, like the Greeks or the bygone civilizations of old. My wife has eyes of ancient green. I hear green skies, green water, and I hear green notes when I bear no malice against these strange children. My cohort, envious like serpents, stole all the books about hope from the library and tempted our offspring with a digital sapphire stage, choleric and lewd, so they could constantly dress and undress for our entertainment. Now bragging is all they have, these lonely whales who sing at bizarre and unlistenable frequencies in our jaded ocean. We will go to our funerals in hearses provided by Uber, and it's our own damn fault. But for now, stay off my emerald lawn and breathe the air from our greenhouse while I get stoned with your dad, finest strain of Prussian blue that can't be synthesized. This one, thematically kind of similar, another poem about color, in a way, color out of space. This is color out of space. If you saw the well-regulated militia cascade against the Capitol, waves cramming the gendarme into smaller and smaller spaces, and the gray and turbulent waters manifesting a violent monochromatic unity, then men want comfort, nothing more, and they will find it in you. Authority is like a hydra. Flip your skateboard over the fascist's head, and two will grow where there was one, a perverse typhon that spreads its filth over all it touches. But a behemoth cannot wander everywhere at once. The gaunt girl on the runway, emaciated and freezing, is no black hole for the male gaze, despite her militia acolytes. She has wasted away to her scaffolding and reclaimed her space by rejecting it, providing authority a spectrum of nothingness as comfort. And I, yes, all men, digest her on her own terms, as she accommodates with comfort to the smallest of spaces where no waves dare crash. This is a rhymed poem. It's called The Load. I wrote it 15 years ago, and I updated it to, make it a little sharper. But since we're talking about different forms of poetry, rhymed, unrhymed, I thought I'd include a rhymed one. The Load. Paul, the pallbearer, the muscular terror, was stronger than anyone known. He bore the weight of his corpulent mates, but wondered who'd carry him home. With shovel in hand, Paul spat at the land as he buried another friend. With a skeleton's grin, he quaffed tonic and gin as he awaited his own bitter end. In his 60th year, with a curse and a tear, Paul embraced blood over bone, chose opioid bliss, the poppies that kiss, as he pondered the greatest unknown. With his powder platoon and a belt and a spoon, Paul did his best to escape. Pharmaceutical strife gave no meaning to life, only tremors and blisters and scrapes. Adrift in a fog of needles and grogs of the world that he had belied, Paul pounded his fist at life's spiritless mist. There was no purpose that he could find. He said with a sigh, you shit and you die, and you lose a bit of yourself with each breath. Every woman and man seeks some greater plan, but the only design is death. With a click and a flash, dust splatter and ash, free. And as light disappeared, 'twas not death Paul feared, just his nagging humanity. So I sing my friend's ode as I bear his stout load and pray that my burden won't fall. Because one day, my mate, you'll carry my weight. We all have our caskets to haul. I've got one more rhymed poem in this group. It's a sonnet. Since sometimes I like traditional form, this one's called A Hate Crime Sonnet. A hate crime sonnet. Time I wrote a note to say goodbye, then folded it into a paper plane. I launched its flimsy skin into the sky. It struck you in the eye and made it rain. My cycle always syncs with yours like that. At least I wish that could be true somehow. I wish my chest were not dreadfully flat, or people weren't holier than thou. I like the taste of metal in my cheek. My ache for you is love that will not rust. And in your mind, I'll be forever young. Conjoined, we could one day be ash and dust. If I could make one final desperate plea, I wish you'd lie here now and bleed with me. The last one of the group.
Thank you. What do you think, Alexander? What do you think your work conveys about the human condition?
Well, it's not necessarily a positive one. I think it conveys a lot of fear. That, people have emotions like grief. People have been through some terrible stuff. And it's that fear that drives people, and fear that might make them commit hate crime, or ponder their own mortality. And it's this kind of fear based in mortality, but in other things too, that kind of makes humans go, and that's a sad thought, but I also think it's a true thought.
All right. So then, is there a particular message that you are attempting to communicate with your work? What are you attempting to achieve through your poetry?
Well, first of all, I'm trying to build that refuge that I mentioned in my title, that people who may feel the same way as I do have a place to go with it, people who don't fit in. I have some individual causes like fat acceptance, politics. You heard one of the ones I read was a January 6th poem. But basically, I guess as Norm Macdonald said, present art or painting is just paint, and without the illusion, or at least in the way I see it, without illusion.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to convey. And I'm also trying to write something that a reader can walk away with. To prove my point, since I'm not writing, a treatise or an article, the proof is in the emotional impact. And that's also something I'm trying through my poetry. Trying to make people feel.
Yes.
The world's against most people, and someone who's not afraid of an acute understanding of that, then I hope my poetry is a good place for you, and a place where you can feel that.
Wow. So your target audience is anyone, really, who needs a place of refuge.
Yes, exactly. That I have, I've read poetry, and first of all, I'm going to invoke this name, and I'm going to invoke it critically. So I want to make clear that I think this poet is a fantastically talented poet. But I've read poems by Mary Oliver. And I find them difficult to like, just because of the universality of the writing, that trying to touch everyone. I'll give an example. I showed my wife, since sometimes I hijack the computer and show her videos from YouTube. I showed her 2 rock concerts. One was a Minor Threat punk rock DC concert from the 1980s. And everyone in the audience is 16 to 17. The band plays a song, Ian MacKaye strikes that first chord, and the kids go nuts. They go up to the ceiling. Everybody's moving around. It's like a tornado. And the other is a better-known band who's doing an arena rock concert. And I'm like, if you're trying to get a response out of your audience, which show would you rather play? And, in my mind and in my wife's mind, unless she was humoring me, it happens, the first show, even though it's smaller, since there's that connection with that audience. So, fewer people at the venue, but they are on board with kind of the message that you're trying to send, and I think that's the more important thing. So I guess that's how I would answer your question.
Very nice. Please share some more of your work.
Okay. These are poems that reach out towards, I guess, what I intend my audience to be. The first one is called Envy. Envy. I'm jealous of that cane you carry that holds your weeping body upright as the teardrops of your gait tiptoe like a midnight thunderstorm. I'm jealous of the braces on your legs, the soft steel that stamps its name on your silky shaven legs but presses its callous skin against me. I'm jealous of the tubes in your arms, the erotic ether they inject, which makes you swoon like my tongue once did between your lips. I remember the day I fell in love with the urn that contains you, caresses you forever, with a sort of tenderness I never could, as I stare at its curves with my arms empty. The second poem is called Murder We Wrote. Murder We Wrote. When we played Clue as a family, Miss Scarlet was always the killer. It was my mother's warning about a certain, and as a young Professor Plum in the study with a candlestick, guess who I pursued? I don't like to dedicate poems, but this one is for the harlots, the ones who don't yet want to kill me, the ones with scars where they shouldn't be, the ones that actually need the unpoetic trigger warnings I should have just given. Passion, by both its definitions, is a form of consideration, and the passion you gave me was a roll of the dice. Through laughter and lacrimation, verity and vulnerability, your crazy intertwined with mine as we took each other's meds, which were the same. I suspect crime that Clue lacks character, masculine and moonstruck, easy and wild. Make an accusation, open the envelope, and pull out the card I drew of myself. My mother hated when I did that. This one is called A Final Message from a Dead Friend. It's a true story. A final message from a dead friend. If you place the number 8 on its side, you get infinity. Or at least that's how it's supposed to work. Call Amber the 8th wonder of Red Lion, Pennsylvania, because she had lost 2 toes from shooting fentanyl between them. Her parents found her in the basement, lying on the concrete on her side, somewhat less than infinite. And after she returned from rehab, she was a lion without a mane, or as she put it, without my benzos, I feel like shit. The last time we texted, she complained about having to wear flats. Being the 8th wonder was a burden now. I thought of her one good foot for longer than anyone should have, and then I thought of what to say next. I asked what it was like to be her. Try it, she said 1 week before her death. I don't know if she was serious. I won't know a lot of things. There's no such thing as closure except the kind you invent. So I decided Amber died fulfilled. After all, she had finally tried infinity. And the last one from this group is also a true story. It's someone who did not make it through the pandemic. This poem is called King Richard. King Richard. Every movement is a reaction. So it was no surprise when the mirror slapped you and you wept and gnashed your gums until your drained stopper of a tongue slid down your throat, your face as purple and anaphylactic as an unchaste priest during Lent. You used to eat Christ's flesh with dentures, a heavenly dividend the Lord provided, our money, and gave you your dignity back. But you still lived life in contempt of life, dribbling bits of yourself on our white tile floor, as your bruised and translucent hands pilfered our art and gathered two of every blanket. Except that one Christmas you set out and returned, second-rate, colorless, and hungover, with a torn and tight shirt the wrong size, like the rest of us. And we filled with compassion. You were not holy. Your piety died with your dentures, but for those 48 hours alone you toiled. No lie. You were as mediocre as a poem, but we were surprised, and the mirror was indifferent and unmoved. And those are five, I guess, for what I consider to be my audience.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
How did you no, don't thank me. How did you celebrate when you finished writing the book? What did you do?
Well, to be honest, the first week was full of anxiety. Getting everything in order, promoting everything, making sure people knew that there was a new poetry book. All of these forums, like crowdsourced poems, if people like the poems, they got a post that there was a whole book of poems coming out, making sure everything was okay with my publisher, Dumpster Fire Press. So I'll just drop that name one more time. So it took a bit, and I was asleep, and Leslie is my wife, is probably the only one who knows exactly under what circumstances to wake me up. So she tapped me on the shoulder. It was, I don't know. It was 6 or 7 a.m. And I kind of grunted. And she said, well, this book of poetry is number 2 in terms of new books of poetry. On the Amazon list for, American new poetry books. And I was really blown away with it. I think I'd be happier. I think I was happier that it was number 2 and not number 1, because I don't trust number 1. I think someone's trying to sell something. So, I got really excited about it. And, the fact that not only had I written a book, but that some people were interested in it. It was a feeling of exhilaration, and one that I didn't really realize until a couple days after it was out. And then we got sushi, so much sushi, piles and piles of it. It was delicious, and that day, I got to hold my head high, and
beautiful.
I'm really grateful for being able to feel that way for
fantastic. That's wonderful.
Week.
Did writing the book change the way you view yourself, your life, your lived experiences, anything?
Yes, it did. Since it's going to be on people's shelves. Maybe in 50 years it'll be on people's shelves, and maybe the child of someone who bought the book will ask, "What is this?" And the parent will say, "Oh, it's that weird guy we knew, a couple decades ago." But then they'll open the book and then maybe it'll make a connection with them. I've published stuff that's nonfiction before, and I would consider this nonfiction with a heavy dose of exaggeration. But it's doing something in another format, and really kind of changing gears, and that made me look at myself a bit differently. I'd say most certainly.
I'm going to rephrase that question and ask you to go a little deeper.
Okay.
Who are you? Who are you as a result of writing this book and getting it out there?
It was very important to me that I find a publisher for this book, that someone who owns a press deem my poetry acceptable before I put it out there, before I just yell these words into the void. I wanted someone to say, well, they're words worth yelling into a void. And putting out this book, I mean, what does it make me feel like? I mean, I guess it's the simplest answer of all. It's made me feel like a poet. There's no money in poetry. It's just, people writing books, putting them out, submitting them for publication. And, I'm really proud of myself that I was able to get one through without sounding arrogant. Able to get a book out that will, exist for always.
All right. So in terms of literary success, tell me more in terms of how do you view that for yourself? You've been crowdsourcing, you're number 2, maybe you're number 1. I mean, literary success. What does that mean to you?
I mean, for poetry, I read that if you sell 30 copies of your first book, you do well, and I've been lucky to do better than that.
Wow.
So, and I mean, success is, a moving target. Once you sell or achieve one level of success, you're going to want the next one. So, at times I've just tried to make an effort to stop and say, look, you did this. It worked.
Well,
right?
Question. Are you a star? Are you a star? Tell me. Are you a literary star?
I'm a literary star in my sky. I'm a literary star in my sky. I will say that. I mean, you ask a guy on the street to name 2 contemporary poets, they're not going to be able to do it. So, I had a book published, and, that's good. So, yeah, my sky, yes, I am.
Well, I think you're a literary star.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I don't tell lies anymore. I'm too old to do that. So in terms of crowdsourcing, we're almost at the end of our poetic journey, but have you heard anything from your readers, from the readers of the book? What kind of things did they say?
Yes. Well, they'll point out poems that they liked. And it's interesting because sometimes it's a poem that I really like. And sometimes it's a poem that I barely included, but means a lot to someone. And it's like, gosh, I'm glad I didn't cut that poem out of the, whole book. So I have gotten feedback. That there's a poet in one of the groups, Alexander Perez, who, really liked the Jungian self-analysis during the holidays that I read. And I put that in because I was kind of proud of it. I didn't think anyone would actually like it, but he thought it was really cool. And, it's very gratifying when someone, picks out a poem that you like, or even one that you're kind of 50-50 about, that, including it, maybe was a good decision. So I have heard back from some people, and what's interesting is what they like is all different. So, and honestly, I think that's a good thing. That I think I'd feel differently if everybody liked the same poem, but didn't read the rest of it. I mean, there's no table of contents in this, so people have read their way through, and they've read their way through to poems they thought were pretty okay until they found one that they really liked. So I mean, I can't ask
people really did find refuge in your work, right?
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. You set out to write a book where people could find refuge and feel safe and protected.
Mm-hmm.
And you did it.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a success story. I will say that.
Yes.
And
yes.
And it's a voyage that's been difficult at times, but it's definitely rewarding. And I think maybe I like that the most.
All right. Where can we purchase the book? I know it's already on Amazon. Anywhere else?
It is only on Amazon. If you live in the Metro Detroit area, I have a father who went to several libraries and tried to put the book in them. So it might be in places in the Metro Detroit area. But mainly it's on Amazon, and it's $9. And, the other day, I was trying to fix some smoke alarms. And I went and I had to get some 9-volt batteries. And I bought 2 of them. And it was $10. This book, and this is me selling right now, this book will be with you always. Those 9-volt batteries will be with you for 2 years. And this book is cheap. So,
where do you head from here in terms of your creative future? What are your plans? What's up next?
So what I have planned next is I want to try and get some poems and some journals, see how high I could go. I think it's a success story, even if there's a ceiling to it. See, where I could get my poetry, throw some bottles in the ocean, and see where they land. And eventually, and I do have enough material for another book that I would probably consider better than this one, since I've kept writing even through the publication process. But you probably won't hear from me in terms of that if I pursue it, which at this point I think I would for 2 years, since I can't exhaust my audience. I can't exhaust my friends with a book every 3 months.
And your fans.
Yep. I'm going to take my time, write more poems, and try and write a second book that's better, and try and continue to grow.
All right.
As a poet, try some different things.
Well, when you write that second book, come back and see me. All right?
I would be happy to. You were instrumental in helping the first one get published by helping me find the right people for it. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did not ask you about the cover of the book, which is quite striking. I love that word striking, and it is. Just tell us briefly how the cover was created.
So there are two covers to the book. The first is the one you see, and I gotta say I really like this cover. And basically, Mike Zone, who runs Dumpster Fire Press, said, and he is an artist on staff. The guy's name is Dillinger. It said that there are Dillinger had 4 pieces of art he could use as the cover, and I see this, here at night, going into the water, approaching kind of a certain end, and walking out onto that pier, stepping out into the unknown. And I'm like, gosh, that is a refuge for those who like sad endings. The cover that I drew up, and, well, I didn't draw it up, but the cover that I commissioned was made by an artist named Michelle Dobbs. And it's on page 5 of the book. And there's actually an ekphrastic poem about it, since it was a copyrighted image. And, I didn't want to have to worry about that. So I thought, if I get someone to draw a copyrighted image, then it's not a copyrighted image anymore. It's a drawing. So that's kind of the second cover, and then Mike was kind enough to, include that too. And there's a little bit of art in the book as well, pictures. And that's because I commissioned a few more from Michelle Dobbs. She's a Texas artist. Mm-hmm. I really like her style. But when Dillinger came back with 4 possible options, there was one, and I'm like, I like this one. And Mike was like, it's the one I prefer too. So, wow. It was kind of like everyone who thought about this and understood what it was going to be kind of converged on that image.
Alexander, I feel that you deserve time in the sun.
Thank you.
I really do. You're an incredible man. Brilliant.
Thank you.
And your work, again, like I said, again, the accessibility, but also it's just more than accessible. It's real. And it's about issues that we don't talk about enough. And I like the concept of finding refuge in words, because that builds empathy between people.
Yeah. I mean, if I had one wish for the world, I'd wish that people could have more empathy.
Yes.
To be absolutely honest, I wish that were, a stronger emotion than fear. And I was just a melancholy kook, but I don't know if that's the way it is. So,
well, I want to thank you. You made my night, and I'm sure the people out there listening, finding refuge in your words, you've got a very bright future, man.
Well,
you
thank
really
you.
do.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, and on another note, if you ever want to talk about the Crusades, especially the third one with Baldwin the Fourth and Saladin.
Baldwin the Fourth, the leper? Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The leper king.
Figure. Yeah.
And Richard the Lion's heart and all this. I love stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, my friend, for sharing your work tonight. A well-written collection. Go out and buy it. Alexander Poster. Spotlighted tonight. Man of the hour. The man of every day. All right. And as I share with you every time we're together, let poetry ring somewhere throughout the land. Thank you, Alexander. Good night, man.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Yep.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at qlpor.com.